The 2024 Francis Scott Key Baltimore Bridge collapse. In the early hours of March the 26th, 2024, at 1:28 a.m., the main spans and three nearby approach spans on the northeast side of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland, collapsed after the container ship DALI struck one of its support piers. Tragically, 6 workers performing maintenance on the bridge were killed, while 2 others were pulled from the Patapsco River and survived. The collapse significantly disrupted shipping traffic to and from the Port of Baltimore, halting operations for 11 weeks. Maryland Governor Wes Moore described the incident as a global crisis, noting the impact on over 8,000 jobs. The economic losses from the port's closure were estimated at $15 million per day. State officials announced plans to replace the damaged bridge by the fall of 2028, with projected costs ranging from $1.7 to $1.9 billion United States dollars. DALI had departed the Port of Baltimore at 12:44 a.m. on March the 26th, heading for Colombo, Sri Lanka, with 2 harbor pilots guiding the vessel. Following standard procedures, tugboats that assisted in its departure left the ship once it entered the main channel. However, at 1:24 a.m., DALI experienced a complete blackout, causing it to drift off course. While a backup generator restored some of its power, it didn't revive the ship's propulsion system. At 1:27 a.m., the ship issued a mayday, alerting the Maryland Department of Transportation that the ship had lost control and was on a collision course with the bridge. One of the pilots urgently requested the halting of bridge traffic. The ship's lights flickered, turning off and on twice before impact, with smoke billowing from its funnel. At 1:28 a.m., the MDTA police were notified, and traffic was stopped on the south side of the bridge within 20 seconds. By 1:29 a.m., the north side traffic was also stopped, just moments before the collapse. According to the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, DALI had dropped anchor as part of its emergency measures before it crashed. The collision caused the bridge to break apart, leaving sections of the structure in the river and severing access from both sides. The main span fell onto the ship's bow, with part of it remaining lodged there. The entire event, including the ship's collapse, was captured on video. At the time of the collapse, several vehicles were on the bridge, but it was initially believed that no one was inside of them. Workers who had been repairing potholes were on their break in their vehicles when the incident occurred. A local resident, awakened by the noise, described the sound as a deep rumble that shook his home, comparing it to the sensation of an earthquake. By 1:30 a.m., emergency services were receiving 911 calls, and the Baltimore Police Department was informed at 1:35 a.m. A large-scale rescue operation was launched, involving Coast Guard boats and a helicopter. 50 divers across 8 public safety teams were sent to search for those who may have fallen into the river. The Francis Scott Key Bridge's continuous truss design was fracture critical, meaning its structural integrity relied on the whole framework. There was no backup system in place if support for any section was compromised. The collision with the container ship DALI destroyed the southwest main truss pier, triggering the collapse of both the southern and central spans, followed by the northern span. The entire sequence of failures occurred within 30 seconds, causing multiple spans to fall into the Patapsco River. At the time of the collapse, the bridge was fully compliant with building codes, It was equipped with dolphin and fender systems to protect against ship collisions, but these measures provided inadequate from the impact. Of DALI's 4,700 shipping containers, 13 were damaged, with 2 falling into the river, neither of which contained hazardous materials. The ship itself sustained damage above the waterline and became entangled with 3,000 to 4,000 tons of bridge wreckage, which pinned it to the channel floor. Despite this, the ship remained watertight, and the company initially reported no water pollution caused by the vessel. At the time of the accident, the water temperature was about 47 degrees Fahrenheit or 8 degrees Celsius. 2 individuals were rescued from the river, one in critical condition and the other unharmed. One of the survivors, a Mexican national, reportedly escaped his vehicle by manually rolling down the window as the bridge collapsed. 6 members of the maintenance crew working on the bridge were declared missing and later presumed dead after the Coast Guard stopped its search. On May the 7th, the bodies of all 6 workers had been recovered from the river. On March the 27th, the bodies of a 35-year-old Mexican national and a 26-year-old Guatemalan national were recovered in a red pickup truck submerged 25 feet below the collapsed bridge. Other victims included a 38-year-old Honduran national whose body was recovered from his vehicle on April the 5th, and an unidentified individual whose family requested anonymity, found in a construction vehicle on April the 14th. On May the 1st, the body of Miguel Angel Luna Gonzalez, 49, was pulled from a submerged truck, and on May the 7th, the final victim, Jose Minor Lopez, 37, was recovered. While DALI's crew and the 2 harbor pilots escaped serious injuries, 1 crew member suffered minor injuries that required stitches. Organizations like the Baltimore International Seafarers Center provided support to the stranded crew, including giving them Wi-Fi hotspots. The collapse obstructed nearly all access to the Port of Baltimore, trapping over 40 ships and preventing nearly 30 others from entering the port. The Trade Point Atlantic Terminal at Sparrows Point was the only part of the port unaffected by the collapse. On April the 3rd, the terminal announced preparations to handle redirected ships, expecting to process 10,000 vehicles in 15 days. On May the 15th, the BBC reported that DALI's 21-member crew, all of Indian and Sri Lankan nationality, remained confined below deck as they lacked entry visas or shore passes. Their mobile phones had been confiscated by the FBI. By June, the crew was allowed to disembark, with 10 members permitted to leave the US, while 11 senior crew members were required to stay in Baltimore as legal proceedings continued. Efforts to remove the bridge debris began on March 30th, with the first piece of the wreckage pulled from the river. On April 1st, the Coast Guard opened a temporary channel for work vessels in the recovery efforts, with ships approved for passage on a case-by-case basis. On April 2nd, the first tugboat had navigated through its alternative channel, and salvage crews began recovering containers from DALI on April 7th. By the middle of April, over 1,000 tons of steel had been removed from the river, and by April 26th, roughly 3,000 of the estimated 50,000 tons of wreckage had been cleared, with 171 commercial vessels passing through 4 alternative channels. The salvage effort had expanded to include 36 barges, 27 tugboats, 22 floating cranes, 10 excavators, a dredger, a skimmer, and 3 Coast Guard cutters, supported by over 800 personnel from various agencies and contractors. By the end of April, Another 300 tons of wreckage had been cleared, and authorities anticipated DALI would be disentangled from the debris by May the 10th. On May the 13th, after the weather delay, explosives were used to remove the part of the bridge resting on DALI's bow. The ship's hull remained intact below the waterline, which helped to facilitate the salvage. On May the 20th, DALI was finally freed from the wreckage, dislodged from the mud, and towed away from the site of the collapse.